Hi, I am Amani, a PhD student supervised by Professor Elisa Bertino. This presentation focuses on the problem of learning attribute-based access control policies from data. Today, we have a lot of data available which enables using them for learning policies. Here is the outline of my presentation. I will start with motivation, problem description, related work, then I will explain and describe the proposed framework and show experimental evaluation. I will start reviewing concepts about access control. Access control is a fundamental security mechanism used in operating systems based on a set of rules of policies. For example, these policies are used to control who can access device or use a drone. Formally, we define access control as a mechanism which decides whether a user can access a specific resource for performing a certain operation, for example, read and write. Various access control models have been proposed, including MAC, RBAC, and ABAC. RBAC has been very important, but now, since several years, there is a more recent evolution which generalized the whole set of rules into attribute-based access control policies. They are basically rules which are expressed as Boolean combinations of conditions against the attributes. Attributes are properties which are relevant in certain domain for security, including user and resource attributes. A rule contains expressions, either user expression, resource expression, or both based on these attributes. This expression denotes users and resources, which are the users that are allowed to access resources. Every user who verifies these conditions is a user to which these rules apply. ABAC has been standardized by the National Institute of Standards and Technology in 2014. There are industrial products which are publicly available engines. ABAC has been implemented by XAML, which is specified by XML and more recently JSON notation. Recently, ABAC has been adapted by many organizations because it has various advantages. It is based on attributes, hence it is composed of very detailed rules based on conditions of these attributes. That is why it is fine-grained. Also, it is dynamic, so rules are evaluated when the actual request is issued. This simplifies a lot the management. If an attribute value has changed for a user, then the rules that was applied will no longer apply, and there is nothing need to be changed, but different rules might be applied instead. Hence, it needs less modifications. Also, it contains contextual attributes which are relevant to environment properties, for example, location and time. Overusing ABAC policies has some limitations. First, specifying ABAC policies is a complex task since it requires a detailed knowledge about users and resources attributes and environment, especially with the variety of those attributes. Moreover, specifying ABAC is time-consuming. For example, an audit log for an organization might include million access requests. This makes it important to find approaches to automate specifying ABAC policies. Furthermore, some organizations still adopt low-level model, especially RBAC, as we mentioned earlier, and these organizations might want to migrate to ABAC policies. However, the migration is a tedious job, thus it is more convenient to automate the migration process. Given that there are many data sources related to access control, such as security tracking logs, especially with the availability of security information and event management logs, there are also additional sources, for example, user directories, LDAP, organizational charts, and workflows. We can leverage all these data sources using various machine learning techniques to generate ABAC policies, which we do using Polisma, our proposed framework. Here we formalize the problem of learning ABAC policies. We use logs of access control decision examples, as well as context information, if available, which comprise the set of users, resources, actions, and their attributes, in addition to metadata obtained from LDAP directories and relation between users and resources to generate a set of symbolic rules. The generated rules, ABAC rules, must verify certain equality requirements, which are correctness and completeness. We can measure the correctness by the precision and recall of the decisions made by the rules. For example, if there was a generated rule which authorizes a planner to read a budget resource, however, such users are not eligible to do such operation, this rule is incorrect. requirement is completeness, which means that there should be a rule to control any potential access request in the system. This requirement can be measured by a new metric, which we define as percentage of controlled requests. For example, if there is a rule which authorizes the planner to read scheduled resource, however, we don't have a rule for write perm operation, so the engine will not generate a correct decision for such situation. Learning about policies is associated with some issues. One issue is when the log of decision examples contain noisy examples. For example, the log might contain inconsistent decision examples. Such case might happen when having a log for long term. Another issue is overfitting. Overfitting refers to the situation when the learned APAC policies are appropriate only for the access requests observed in the learning process and fail to control new access requests, so causing the learned policy set to be incomplete. To overcome the overfitting problem, usually the generalization is the solution. However, generalizing a rule should be not unsafe. This is an example of unsafely generalized rule. This rule is unsafe because it allows all users in a specific department to access any resource. The problem of feedback learning have been studied recently. First, there are 3 research works from 3 different research groups that investigated this problem. However, all of these approaches are not always applicable because of mainly relying on using the decision logs. Another research work by Karima and Joshi, but their approach does not support rules generalization. Polisma, to the best of our knowledge, is the first generic framework that leverages potential context information along with decision logs, uses statistical machine learning techniques for policy learning, while at the same time being able to generate symbolic rules that overcome the issues we have discussed. Now we will describe our proposed framework Polisma. It consists of 4 steps: rules mining, rules generalization, rules augmentation using domain-based restrictions, and rules augmentation using machine learning. The first step, rules mining. In this step, we analyze the association between users and resources using association rule mining. For example, a prior algorithm can be used to extract rules from the decision examples. However, rules that are generated from this step are potentially overfitted or unsafely generalized. Thus, we need to post-process those rules generated from the first step in the second step, which is rules generalization. So we took the generated rules from the first step and post-process them to generate rules that are generalized but also safe. So each rule is post-processed using the set of user and resource attributes provided by either the log, context information, or both. Second step has 2 strategies: brute force strategy, which uses attributes of users and resources to find the attribute expression that has the highest safety level to perform the generalization. So it searches exhaustively for the most appropriate attribute expression that captures the subsets of users and resources having the same permission authorized by the rule to be investigated and according to the decision example dataset. The second strategy, which is structure-based strategy, it uses, in addition to the user and resource attribute, it uses the relations between them, which is part of the context information if available. So it analyzes this relations between users and resources to gather information about hidden correlations between common attributes of a user and a resource. The first common attribute value between the user and resource of the rule of interest is used for post-processing this rule. The generated rules from the first 2 steps mainly depend on log of access decision examples. However, most logs contain a few examples of ineligible accesses. Ineligible accesses refers to the situations where users try to access resources that they are not supposed to access. We have a real dataset from Amazon log, and it contains less than 2% of ineligible access requests. Thus, the generated rules from the first 2 steps will contain few number of negative authorizations. Thus, ineligible access requests might not be covered by the learned policies. The goal of this step is to add explicit negative authorizations. Negative authorizations are very important to make exceptions, especially in the modern systems. If there are no explicit negative authorizations, this means when access request is denied, this might mean that it is explicitly denied or there was no corresponding rule. And this might lead to hidden vulnerability, thus we need to avoid such situations. To achieve this goal, we need to analyze the domain of authorized access requests of users and resources appearing in the decision example dataset to augment restriction rules. For example, we take the user set and divide it into groups. For example, here based on the role attribute, we divide the users into 3 groups, and we map those groups to list of operations that they are allowed to do. And after that, we augment the rules for each user group. We will generate a rule to restrict that group to perform a set of operations. The second example, instead of only dividing the users, we also divide the resources and do the mapping between each user group and resource group, and based on those groups we generate and augment restriction rules. Now the question is how to do or how to create the groups of users and resources. So we have 2 strategies: semantic strategy, which assumes prior knowledge about the attributes to be used for partitioning the user and resource sets. For example, as we did, we used that role attribute for users. And the heuristic strategy, which searches heuristically for attributes to partition the user and resource sets evenly. To estimate the attribute distribution, entropy can be used. The fourth step, rules augmentation using machine learning. So until now, the first 3 steps consider the semantic and attribute information, but not the similarity between the access requests. This step uses a machine learning classifier that builds a training model based on the attributes provided by the decision example dataset and context information. For Polisma, we use 2 datasets: synthetic, and it's called Project Management PM, and real dataset, which is Amazon. Amazon log, and it's referred to as AZ. This table shows statistics about those 2 datasets. Those are examples of learned policies using PM dataset, and those are examples of learned policies using Amazon dataset. This figure shows the evaluation of Polisma using brute force strategy, but for step 2, and the heuristical strategy for step 3 using Amazon project management dataset. The quality of the rules improves gradually, as shown, but as we can see, the quality of generated rules is significantly enhanced after the second and fourth steps, which shows the advantage of using safe generalization and similarity-based techniques. This also shows the evaluation of Polisma using the structure-based strategy for step 2 and the semantic strategy for step 3, also using project management dataset. The strategy, as shown, the strategy that exploit additional knowledge about user and resources attributes, for example, the relations, as in the structure-based strategy, have better results compared to the ones that require less prior knowledge, as shown in the previous slide. We evaluate Polisma using other learning approaches. One approach is naive machine learning approach, which we developed utilizing a machine learning classifier to create rules without the use of any generalization strategy, which were used in Polisma. Second approach is and stellar minor. Third is Rhapsody approach. This figure shows the evaluation and comparison between Polisma, naive, and stellar minor using project management dataset. With respect to one stellar minor, Polisma F1 score improves by a factor of 2.6, and with respect to naive approach, F1 score of Polisma improves by a factor of 1.2. This shows the importance of integrating multiple techniques in Polisma to enhance the policy learning outcome. This figure shows the comparison between naive, Rhapsody, and Polisma using Amazon dataset. With respect to Rhapsody, Polisma F1 score improves by a factor of 1.3. With respect to naive, it improves by a factor of 2.7. Polisma and naive, both of them use machine learning classifier, but given that we use other generalization mechanisms in Polisma and also other learning multiple techniques for learning the policies, that's why the results of Polisma is much better than the results of the naive approach. We evaluate Polisma on a large scale dataset, which is the whole Amazon dataset, which consists of 700,000 decision examples. Polisma achieved significantly improved scores compared to those when using the small sample of 1,000 decision example, because of Polisma was able to utilize larger set of decision examples. But considering that the AZ dataset consists of small number of decision examples, the results of the experiment is considered as promising. The second figure, which is on the right, shows the result considering only positive authorizations. The results improved significantly. This is due to the fact the negative examples are few, and so they are not sufficient in improving the learning of negative authorizations. In conclusion, Polisma is a framework for learning evac policies from examples and context information. Our evaluation carried out on real-world decision log and on synthetic one. So both show that Polisma is able to learn policies that are both complete and correct. Using the real dataset, we generated rules achieved a F1 score of 98% and PCR of 100%. Using the synthetic dataset, we generated rules that achieved a F1 score of 86% and PCR of 95%.